My name's John Winkley. I work for a specialist education consultancy called AlphaPlus, and we've done a lot of work with UKTI and DIT, and they've asked me to come along and just say a few words about what it's been like exporting to GCC. Most of what I'm going to talk about is Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. Obviously GCC is a bit wider than that, but as far as I can tell, the issues I talk about are fairly generic to the whole region. So, without a hint of promotion, I just need to tell you a little bit about what we do as a business. We're a specialist consultancy that deals with assessment, examinations, qualifications. We're not very well known. But in the last 2 or 3 years, we'll have done £10 million of business overseas and a similar sort of amount of business in the UK. We work with all ages. Our job is to make exams work better. So we write some of the national tests in the UK, the SATs. We work on GCSEs, on A-levels, on vocational qualifications, right up to doctors, nurses, lawyers, accountants. So lots of statistical work, lots of assessment, design, qualifications, and so on. You might think, well, that's nothing to do with our business. But what is interesting, I think, is that we're specialists. We don't do general education. We do a very specialist thing. And I think that's made it easier for us to export. Without wanting to say anything rude about Bett, because I think it's a fantastic show, we don't exhibit here. And I've also developed 2 technology companies in the past. They now employ 400 people, and they don't exhibit here either. And the reason is that they're very specialised. They know who their customers are, and that helps a lot in export markets. Oh, so these are the things we do. You can get a copy of the slides from UKTI if you want them. But yeah, we work in education, and we're all about assessment. That's it. That's all you need to know about AlphaPlus. About 4 years ago, we realised that a lot of the UK market was in a downturn. We were still doing pretty well, but we're quite ambitious to grow, and we thought, right, we better look at export. Partly because we wanted to grow our business, but also because, particularly in the world of curriculum and assessment, things can get very insular. If all your team do all day is work on national tests, GCSEs, A-levels, then you forget that the rest of the world doesn't do those qualifications. They do other stuff in different ways, in many cases better. So we decided to develop our export business. And within about 3 to 4 years, it's now probably 50 to 60% of our business. It varies from year to year. If I had to put my finger on 3 things that had made a difference, made it successful, I would say, first of all, you've got to have a clarity of vision about what your business does. You only need to look around this show here to know that unless you're really clear about what you're selling, and unless you've got some real kind of sense of what's important about it, then it's going to be tough to get a toehold. So you could call it clarity of vision. I think you need to think about partnership. As an SME, it's tough going. We have in the vocational education space, we have a global partnership with City and Guilds. I could say loads about that, but basically, working with them, it's a long-standing, successful program, and it's worked well for both of us, and that's helped us in the vocational space. The third thing I would say is you need to be very clear about the ethics and ways of doing business. International trading will very quickly expose variations or confusion within your business about what you are prepared to do and what you're not prepared to do, and who you'll work with and on what terms. And this sounds like motherhood and apple pie stuff, but it really isn't. You know, my very first decision on export was to decide whether to get involved in a project which I knew would fail. The country, I'm not going to name them, but the country had this idea that they were going to do something, and I knew it wouldn't work. I just knew it wouldn't work. But they were really keen for us to help them. You've got to decide how you're going to deal with that. I'd say that's really important, whether you're a tiny company, a big company, having a kind of clear handle on your ways of doing business. That's a really big deal. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about GCC. I've got 3 slides. One about the general features of the market, one about schools, one about vocational. So most of this is good news, but there are a few cautionary tales in there. First of all, there's huge interest in education across the GCC. I would kind of characterize it as you're dealing with first world markets whose education systems are patchy, but in many cases kind of second world education systems. And the governments and the people, the parents, the children, the stakeholders, everybody wants it to get better. So it's an open door. There's a great deal of respect for British education. And not just our education, but our ways of working. So the fact that we can manage projects well, that we say what we're going to do and we do what we're going to say, that whole kind of British cultural thing, that plays very well in these markets. The education systems across the GCC, whether it's technical, vocational, primary, secondary, you're dealing with pedagogies that would not look out of place in the 1960s. A focus on knowledge-based education, on learning facts, traditional pedagogies, the sort of stuff I'm doing now with a chalk on a board or a whiteboard. And if you're into skills-based education like we are, the understanding of skills-based education, modern pedagogy, the idea of competency is weak. They know they need it, but there's a lot to do to kind of work out how to do that. Also, with my interest in assessment, there's been a really strong focus on process. So, are kids turning up? Are the teachers teaching good lessons? Does the school look nice? It's all about inputs and process. Historically, there's been relatively little measurement of outputs. That's changing. People are working out that outputs are what counts. Hello. But that's really surprising because if you're a UK business, then outputs is everything, isn't it? Certainly in my business, it's all about the exam results, the test results. Okay, a little bit about the schools market. I'm worried that you probably can't read some of this, but apologies if that's the case. So, Britain is very well regarded internationally and in GCC. The British education system and our ways of doing business. And that's reflected on the ground in a strong presence of British international schools, the British Council, that whole kind of community, and also British publishing and awarding bodies. So nobody's going to be surprised to see British people appearing in Saudi Arabia. The private school system is one thing. Our interest is primarily in helping the nations improve the education of their own people, their indigenous people. We don't do much with private schools, and the reason for that is we think the most interesting opportunity is upskilling the people who were born and grew up in those countries. And there's a growing recognition of the need to invest in state education.
Just try to make it quick.
On the downside, there's a huge proliferation of local agencies. So you might think, even in the UK after the bonfire of the Quangos, we have a lot of agencies. Well, you haven't seen anything until you travel to Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Saudi Arabia and encounter the complex maelstrom of organizations all bearing down on the same fundamental challenges. The approach they're taking is to modernize all areas of the system simultaneously. So it's a let a million flowers bloom approach. And that presents challenges to just doing a good job. One of our tenets is we always try and do a good job. As an SME, we think the way to stand out is to just, say what you're going to do and do what you say. And we've kind of stuck to that. But sometimes it's difficult when you're kind of in this complex structure. I would also say that technology is very popular. My business is a large part is technology. But we try to avoid supplying large amounts of complex technology because although it's possible to sell it and deliver it, I don't think a lot of the environments are ready to take advantage of that. We've all seen technology that sits on the shelf. if you haven't got a plan for educating the teachers to use it, then personally I think it's a tough call. In vocational markets, kind of a similar story. I think the biggest agenda is many of these countries operate their basic infrastructure using immigrant labour, and there's a strong push to rebalance that by providing young people with skills and then getting them to take the jobs that previously may have been done by immigrant labour. Now it's partly an educational challenge because many of the young people are really quite a low skill base, but it's a cultural and sort of nationhood challenge as well, and this makes it difficult. So there are all sorts of projects in those areas. Trying to stem the flow of immigrant labour is one part of it, but trying to provide not just education but good jobs for young Saudis, for example, who have high expectations but have a long way to go to be able to match the skills of young people. I may sound quite negative here, but actually these nations are making enormous progress very, very rapidly. They're achieving in 10 years what it took the UK probably a century to do. But, you know, there are a few squeaks at the edges that make that challenging. If there's one thing that's common to the entire world, it's that most parents would like their kids to go to university. They don't know, they can't put their finger on why exactly, but they do. And that's nowhere stronger than in the GCC. So technical skills education is not yet an attractive option for young people and their parents. And bizarrely, private sector employment is not that attractive either. People want to work in government. And I can't, you know, I know I'm on a UKTI stand, but I couldn't bear the thought of working in the civil service myself. I like doing what I do. But in the GCC, government jobs are at the top of the pile, and private entrepreneurship is still embryonic. They're really enthusiastic about entrepreneurship, and rightly so, because the private sector is ripe for improvement, but it's kind of not there yet. And there are fantastic opportunities in employability, by which I mean basic maths and literacy, what I call going to work skills, turning up on time, not being rude to your boss. And for those that want to kind of run their own businesses, entrepreneurship is really important. There are fantastic opportunities. So when I talk about vocational education, I am talking about electrical engineering and civil engineering and so on, but I'm also talking about those kind of fundamental skills to get you into the workplace. Okay, so I was asked to just say a few things about what it's been like working in the market. We've gone from pretty much no export to probably having 60 people working on export projects right now. I mean, it goes up and down, but it's about that. So I'm just going to talk about a few things. And I'm going to start by talking about UKTI and UK government. If you believe that education is great, is going to get out there and make those sales for you, then they're really not, okay? It wouldn't be ethically solid for them to do that in favour of another company in your sector. But I have to say, they're not paying me to do this, by the way, they have been pretty helpful. Simple things like getting visas, understanding who to talk to, getting a bit of support when you're in country, going to the embassy for a cup of tea. These things make a difference when if you Google and you've set up a headquarters in Riyadh, then you've got a little network. But if it's just me, going out there to go and talk to some people, then a little bit of support counts for a lot. And they've been fantastic at that. They have regional advisors in the UK, and they have people like Mumtaz, who's in the sort of beige jacket, people like Mumtaz in each of the countries. And I have to say, they've been we don't just export to Saudi Arabia, which is Mumtaz's area. We export all over, and they've all been uniformly pretty good, provided you don't ask them to do your job for you. Provided you realise you've got to go and make the sales. Okay, so my top 7 points for doing business. First of all, this is high octane stuff. Okay, I'm working round clockwise. It is not easy to get paid. You do the job, you deliver, they sign it off, they don't pay. If you haven't got a stomach for this, then don't do it. Do something else, because it's high octane. I could say loads about it. We've never had an unpaid debt, but we do have some quite long debts. And it's, I wouldn't say we've got all the skills, but we've learned a lot. But don't kid yourself. We have never been paid on time once by anybody. But we've always got paid. And so I'll just leave it at that. If your cash flow can't stand it, if your heart rate can't stand it, just don't do it. Secondly, for goodness sake, don't believe that you can run your projects by remote control. Imagine you're a head teacher of a school in East London, and you found this fantastic bit of software that you're going to spend tens of thousands of pounds on, and they told you they were going to run it for you from Australia. You wouldn't buy it, because you know you're going to need on-the-ground support. You're going to need to be able to talk to somebody. It's no different there. Our early successes were because the client said, we need somebody on the ground for the whole project. And we said, okay, we'll find a way to do that. And we did. We had somebody in their office all day, every day, and it made a huge difference, a huge difference. If you try and run it from London, they're going to get really upset. And one of the reasons for that is that the entire way of doing business is verbal. Okay? I've never seen any notes from a meeting. We used to take notes from the meeting and write it all up, send it off. You can do it, but they won't read it, and if you quote it at them, they'll ignore it. So we just kind of gave up doing it. Similarly, contracts don't work the same way. The whole way of doing business. I'm not saying it's a bad way. I'm really not. Actually, it can work very well, but it is different. And you just kind of got to work it out and get on with it. I would say two other things. Firstly, there is no substitute for respect for the culture in which you're working, and the simple business of trust, building trust. So many of these organisations have had bad experiences, particularly with management consultants like me, who've come in and done a kind of sketchy job and then headed off, And they know this. As nations, they know that we look on their nations as kind of easy opportunities. And I think they've mostly moved beyond that now. And they're looking for serious suppliers who can do specialist technical stuff well. So our experience has been that if you keep your promises, simple promises like I'll be there on Tuesday, complicated promises like this will work in every school on every tablet, So you make relatively few promises and you make sure you keep them and you remind them that you've kept them from time to time. That's a successful model. Actually, it's not that different to the model that we all know and love in the UK, but in the kind of maelstrom of meetings and all that's going on, it's quite easy to forget that and say, oh yeah, we can do that, when actually you'd probably be better off just saying, we don't do that. We can find you somebody who does, but it's not us. And finally, I would say, and this comes back to the UK TI and the benefits of export finance and education is great. Do a bit of homework. You're going to get approached by loads of people who will say, we will represent your business in this country. And if you're lucky, you'll hit on the perfect partner straight away. But everybody thinks they can do it. There's a great optimism, enthusiasm. And you need people like Mumtaz to say, look, before you do a deal with these guys, just go and have a talk to some other people as well. Before you pin all your hopes on government agency X, maybe you just go and have a chat with government agency Y, see if they're joined up. The biggest reason for failed sales projects in this region, in my experience, so the business of winning the business, is usually that the client, in my experience, is that the client who's put out the tender doesn't have the authority to sign off the work. Now that doesn't happen in Western markets, but it happens loads internationally. And usually they haven't done it deliberately, they're not fishing. That verbal culture and that complexity means that they haven't quite nailed down the sign off of the work. So there's no substitute for due diligence and market intelligence. And there's also no substitute for really good project management. So in the first 3 years, we had a rule that we would never have an employee on site anywhere unless they were accompanied by a director. You might say, well, that's a load of bother. That's a lot of directors away from their families. And it is. But we just had to do it because you can't put junior staff in a position where they're asked to make promises or guarantee things without being able to back up that and actually commit the organisation. So that was a big thing. I think it worked. We're now a bit more relaxed about that because we know the customers and things have moved on. But really high quality project management is important, really important actually.
So we see that Saudi Arabia covers most of the Arabian Peninsula. It's approximately 80% of the Arabian Peninsula. It has 13 regions, and the biggest region is the Eastern Province, where the oil and gas is. The population is very young, and I'm quoting the Minister of Trade last month. He said that 81% are under the age of 49. He said 74 are under the age of 45, and 50% under the age of 25. So we see the challenges that the government is facing. And this is one of the reasons where for the establishment of Vision 2030, which I'll be covering now. So, despite the terrible year 2016, we know that the oil prices, the region had a lot of problems, but still the budget was good. 2016, we had we had more revenues by 2.7%. And we had decreased the expenditure by 1.8, despite the oil prices, because Saudi Arabia is connected to the oil. The economy is mostly oil, 80%. This year's budget is 192 expenditure. We have 151.94 billion revenues. So we see that there is a deficit, and I'm sure that deficit will be covered from debts and other sources. The education, so we see how the budget is allocated. Education has the highest, and it has been for the last 5 years. Education always had the highest budget, and this shows the government's commitment to the education sector and the human development. So they are the main factor of the budget. They told me, by the way, to hurry up because John took a lot of my time. So. So Vision 2030, what is Vision 2030? So Vision 2030 is the biggest shakeup for the Saudi economy to diversify its economy. So they don't want to depend on oil anymore. They want to look into other sources for the economy. So they are going to diversify the economy. How would they do that? Looking into other sectors, looking at having localized the defense sector, looking to work on the tourism sector. So these are new sectors that the government is looking at. They want to reduce dependence on oil. They are creating new cities that are mainly for the oil and gas companies. They want more gas production. Sorry. They want more gas. Last year I was doing the same thing and I broke the mic because they told me my voice was too high. So they want to double gas production. They want localize the energy, renewable energy, and increase technology investment. So these are the things that they're looking. They're looking to combat corruption, no more corruption. If you can't do the job, if they found something wrong, you are out. And we have seen this. Recently, we have seen a lot of changes. So I think we are on the right path. They want to attract investment in the mining sector. Mining is another important element for the economy. We have, I think, we have phosphate, uranium, and we have a lot of gold. So they want to increase our investment in the mining sector and are encouraging foreign investors to invest in mining. They want to create more jobs. So by 2020, they want to see around 450,000 new jobs in the private sector. So the private sector, they want to see the private sector in the driving wheel. They have to be very active, the private sector, and they're getting a lot of support from the government. They want to develop the Hajj and Umrah. You know, Saudi Arabia is the home of the two holy mosques, or two holy cities. So they want to develop to have by 2030, instead of 8 million tourism, they want to have 30 million. It's very ambitious, and I think they can do it because they've already started working on the metro. They started working on the railway. So they are connecting all this in order to improve the tourism sector. So this is mainly our Vision 2030, and anywhere you go around in Saudi Arabia or outside Saudi Arabia, you will hear 2030. And we want to see what is the UK capability in the Vision 2030 that we can promote in the market we are in. So, in order to get this vision right, so they had to create a they had to create a national transformation plan, which is a roadmap to implement Vision 30. Sorry, I'm really sorry. To implement Vision 2030. So they are going to implement the implementation steps on a number of sectors covered by 2030. We have in each government now a department that is dealing with Vision 2030 and National Transformation Plan. So the government is very serious, and we have already seen a lot of measures which I will speak later on. They want to identify the challenges faced by the governments and solve it. Not only identify, but solve it too. So there will be evaluation indicators that measures and monitors our performance. There will be, along the way, all evaluating what things have been done. And recently, as I said, there were a number of projects. They did a number of review last year before the new budget was out. They froze salaries, increase. They deducted ministers' pay salaries by 20%. So there was a lot of things that has been implemented from National Transformation Plan. So we are serious. We are serious. And they have also a budget for the National Transformation Plan. This is the budget for the National Transformation Plan so that they are able to enable them to do their job. 2016 it was 1.9. 2017 it will be 8.9. So they are working in it. So what does NTP for education, what does it represent for education? What are they going to do for education? They want to shift to digital education. Sorry, I'm not on the right. They want to shift to digital education. They want teacher training. They want to improve the curriculum. They are improving the quality of primary education, including also a nursery. They're also working on nursery. So there is a lot of things that being taken measures in the education sector. And I have been in the education sector for the last 10 years, and I have seen huge improvement, huge projects. There are bits and pieces. I don't say it's all rosy. No, there are some problems, and I'm sure that John have already touched on that. But we have to evaluate. We have to see what we can do, what we can offer, and we have the right people. That's why DIT, or Department of International Trade, are there to help you. We are there to help the British companies as well as the Saudis. So these are what is for next one is. So what are the opportunities? We say special need education is very important. They have healthcare, mining, marine, aviation, so specialized colleges that they want to establish with the partners. Like Saudi Aramco, the largest oil company in the world, is having to operate now 2 National Power Academy. We have the marine sector, we have the mining sector, they're also opening mining academy. So there is a lot of needs in the specialized sectors. They want to see more Saudis working in these sectors. They're looking for partnership opportunities with Saudi universities, and of course English language. English is very important. As I say, there are risks, and there are challenges, but you have to know. You have to know, do your due diligence properly, know the people that you're working with, know the people, know the culture, have relationship building is very, very important. I have put here late payment, outstanding payment, and this was only in 2016 because of the oil prices and things that are moving, but things are moving now. So who are we? Who are we? We are now in Department of International Trade, and we have three sectors. We have the finance, where they can help you get loans or bonds, and then you have the trade policy, and you have UK trade and investment. That is we. We are on the ground, and all we ask of you is let us know when you are in the country that we are represented, so that we can give you the advice, we can give you the help that is needed. So we are responsible for promoting UK trade in all sectors, not only in education, in all sectors, and also to encourage foreign investment to the UK. So it's a two-way thing that we are working on. What do we ask you? If you win any project in the countries that we are represented, we would like you to sign a form, because it helps us to tell the UK that we are helping the UK economy achieve its objectives of 2030, which is 1 trillion, and help 100,000 new exporters to the markets that we are represented. That's all we ask for. And we could do also a lot of lobbying, HMA, we do a lot of events at the embassy, we attend exhibitions, we introduce you to the right decision makers, we are always there. So our team in the UK is Katrina and Richard. They are based here in London, and they can help you with first inquiries, because any RFIs, any RFPs, any inquiry I get, I send it to them. Besides posting it on our portal, we have a portal called Export is Great portal, where we publish all the opportunities that we get. Here are some do's and do nots. You have to understand the decision-making process and culture is completely different. Invest in relationship. They have to trust you in order to give you a business. So build that trust. Understand the corporate culture and identify key decision makers. Everybody is related to somebody VVIP. So you should know who you are working with, and that's where we could help you. You should take local advice. Local advice is very important. And also visit. I know it's costly, but at the end, if you get a contract, it's worth it. And I know John has been doing a lot of travel to the Middle East. What we don't want you to do, don't sign up with the first partner you meet. So you have to do your due diligence, yeah? Be aware of agency collector. I know a lot of companies that are training providers, and they have City and Guilds logo, and they have nothing to do with City and Guilds. So we have to go and speak to them. So there are a lot of agency collectors. Don't expect emails. They prefer telephone. Okay, so it's not that they don't like you, it's the culture, as I said. It's the culture. Don't be hurried, be patient. And you'll always hear the word inshallah. And it's not a bad word. It says if God willing. I can be here now after a minute if God willing. So it's not something bad, but it is something to get used to. And there is two different of inshallah. There is inshallah, which means if God permits, and there is inshallah if I'm not interested in. So you have to know how this inshallah was pronounced. Yeah? You come to me and I'll tell you. Never generalize. There are many differences in the Gulf. Saudi is different than UAE, different than Bahrain. So everybody has its own culture, although it's all GCC, but it is completely different. Never think big is best for your product, because if you go and work with Aramco, they have huge projects worth billions. And if you have a small thing that they will not be interested in. But if you have something niche, yes, they are looking for niche things. So this is Saudi. I made it on time. These are the events that are happening in the next few months. We have the International Higher Education Conference from 12 to 15 April, and this is mainly for universities, for recruiting students as well as partnership opportunity. Then we have the Gulf Education Conference, which is in Jeddah in February 23-25. You can register online if you're interested. And then we have a seminar on investing in building education. And sorry, this was done beginning of January. And here they are looking for private investors to build schools. Yeah?